Good morning and welcome to this episode of the Ad Drop Podcast. Well, we're about to head into March, and with tournament time, on men's and women's side of college basketball, we got to get this guy in here. He covers D3 women's basketball like no other. Riley Zayas. Riley, what's going on, man? How are you doing today?
Doing great, man. I appreciate you having me on as always. This is such a fun time of year. When we get to tournament time, it feels like, the one of the biggest storylines through the entire season is this build to the tournament and who's on the bubble and which teams are putting themselves in position to get into the tournament itself, much less make tournament runs. And it feels like we're finally at this point where we're 1 week left in the regular season. The NESCAC is already starting their conference tournament this week at the end of this week. Conference tournaments for most leagues are going to follow, and then we got the NCAA tournament. It's all going to happen really, really fast. And man, I just can't wait to cover it all again because this is a very, very fun time of year.
Now, if anyone follows you on social media, they know that you take extra care and effort. You travel everywhere. What is it like dealing with travel, especially in the wintertime, going to these different games?
Yeah. Working on this book on Division III basketball over the last 2 years has really afforded me the opportunity to see a lot of these places and have the chance to go and step on a lot of these campuses for interviews and games. And it's been a tremendous opportunity. Thankfully, I haven't really had any delays. You would think going to all these places in the Northeast and East Coast in the winter, you'd end up with some delays due to some snow or something along the way. But knock on wood, I've been pretty lucky so far. It has been cold. It was in the Northeast at the end of January, and man, it dropped down to the 20s, and not weather I'm very used to in Texas. So yeah, that was an experience for sure. But it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot. I think it's only enhanced my knowledge of Division III and certainly contributed to the book I'm working on, which I'm really, really excited about and continuing to put that together.
Now, you mentioned you were a Texas guy. What was that like stepping off the plane in 20-degree weather and have that first burst of cold air hit your face?
I've had it happen a couple of times now, and every time I don't think you're any more prepared for it than you were the first because it just so different to breathe in that cold air. And yeah, I tell you what though, it's kind of a nice change, to go from 70s and at one point it was 80s a couple of weeks ago when I left and to step off the plane and into that cold weather, and there's still some snow on the ground up in Massachusetts and New York. It was a welcome change, but yeah, definitely different for sure.
Well, there's an old saying that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. What is it about your job and loving what you do that is just, it makes all of the travel, all of the legwork, all the research worthwhile?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's just a passion for what Division III really represents and stands for. This is for all of us who cover Division III. It's not a full-time job or anything like that, right? And like I said, I've been lucky enough to have put together some funding over the last couple of years to put together this book and be able to travel to these places. But ultimately, very similar to the student athletes and the coaches themselves, everyone who covers Division III is doing it because of their passion for it. And I think ultimately that's my goal is to promote and cover these programs, these student athletes and coaches and the work that they're putting in and all that they're accomplishing and give them that recognition that they maybe deserve but don't always get. And I think that's what drives me because along with that, there are just so many stories to be told in Division III, so many stories that people need to hear about that I think really represent what college athletics are truly about. Whether it be some of these places where it's high academic student athletes. In particular, there's been some that I've interviewed that have been GPAs well above 4.0. Doing a double major and starring for the basketball team at the same time, right? Like those are the kinds of things that just really resonate with me in terms of what college athletics is supposed to be about, I think. And that's what drives me is telling those stories, getting those stories out there, and then giving that recognition that is really deserved across the board, across the country. Go to any region, and I've always said this too. I think go to any school. There's always a story to be told. regardless of what that team's record looks like, regardless of where they're at, there's always a story to be told, and that's especially true in Division III.
Now, you had a chance to go to my hometown of Hartford, Connecticut. What was that like stepping into the city and stepping into Connecticut? And where'd you have to eat? What did you take in any good pizza?
Yeah, I was able to right there near campus actually uh, got some good pizza there, and actually had a really quick trip down. I left Springfield, Massachusetts that morning. I had been there, saw the Basketball Hall of Fame. There were certainly some D3 connections even in the Basketball Hall of Fame itself, which was really awesome. And spent some time there as well around Springfield College and their men's basketball program, but went down to Hartford actually Saturday morning. So it was a quick trip down the Amtrak and saw Wesleyan try to defend their perfect record against Trinity, who at that point was 14th in the country. And I tell you what, the gym was packed. There was a lot of excitement in the air around that campus as I kind of got onto campus a couple hours before tip off, and it was yeah, I think one of the better games I've seen over the course of this year. Wesleyan just really a exceptional team. I think everyone saw what they did, becoming the first NESCAC team on the men's side to go through a conference schedule undefeated, which is really cool. Go through a season undefeated, I should say. It's 24-0. So yeah, but that campus is really incredible, and it was a quick trip because I actually had to catch a flight out that very early that next morning. But I enjoyed my time in Hartford. It's a great city, and I'm glad I was able to step onto to Trinity College's campus.
Now, who loses first, NYU, Bowdoin, or Scranton?
NYU, if we're talking on the women's side, because NYU, I've had a chance to see them in person in St. Louis actually when they played WashU as part of a UAA road trip. They played Chicago on Friday night and WashU on Sunday. This was right back at the beginning of this month, actually, February 1st or February 2nd was the game date. And NYU just in everything that they do, I think it's both ends of the floor. I think it starts with defense. Everyone sees the high scoring performances, but it's really the defense. They can win with defense just as well as anyone else in the country. And if you read some of my stuff, one of the things that I really like to value in terms of putting together my top 25 is defensive performance. I think defense travels a little bit better than offense, and you can always play defense no matter the circumstances. NYU does that exceptionally well, and even more so, they defend. And one of the things I've told a lot of people who have asked me, they defend, but they defend with active hands and they don't foul. They're extremely disciplined. So they create deflections, they create havoc, they create pressure on the ball, and they don't pick up a lot of those reach-in fouls that a lot of these other teams just might because of whatever. And obviously that can go against you as the game goes on. NYU is extremely disciplined, and as a result, they force a lot of turnovers, end up with a lot of steals, and really easily turn those into transition buckets because of their athleticism and what they can do in transition and kind of spreading out the floor. Natalie Brunn is one of the best post players in the country. She can run up and down the floor like a guard, and so that helps a lot in transition with what she can do. So I think all around NYU is an extremely complete team. They're deep. I think everyone knows about their depth, but it really starts on the defensive end for me, and that's what's most impressive.
One of the teams I want to talk about is East Texas Baptist. They've lost one game since December 29th. Are they one of the teams that are under the radar that people should kind of look out for?
Yeah, I think ETBU is an extremely talented team with what Blake Arbogast has done down there. He came in early on and they kind of gained a little bit of recognition during that COVID season when not many other teams were playing. They were able to get in a fairly full schedule. And as a result, from that point on, I think his program has really just continued. They were successful before he took over, and they continue to be successful after he's taken over. But yeah, as far as this season goes, they're a team that they brought back a lot. I think we saw from the beginning of the year that they were going to have a strong core, and that goes a long way. When you come into a season, they have some really solid backcourt play led by Peyton Hicks, who's their point guard, experienced player, floor general, everything you want. But they've also added a freshman, Madison Herta, who I think, the ASC is going to be a competitive race for freshman of the year. Jackie Berry at Hardin Simmons is another really, really talented freshman who's going to be in contention for that honor. But what Madison Herta has done as far as her 3-point shooting and her accuracy as a shooter, it's so tough to defend. She hit 6 threes against Maryhill and Baylor on Saturday in a really, really big win for ETBU. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a team to keep an eye on. They obviously beat Wartburg on a neutral court back in December, and that gained them some recognition. They pushed Illinois Wesleyan down to the wire as well, and actually that last loss that you referenced. So, yeah, definitely a team to keep an eye on at Region 10.
Now, when you look at the top teams in the top 25, one thing that stands out is the Landmark Conference. They have Scranton, E-Town, and Catholic U. Three of the top teams in the top 25. What makes that conference so tough as far as those three teams have to play each other twice? What makes that conference such a challenge?
Yeah, I think the Landmark is a really interesting league because you have a very clear top and then maybe a pretty clear bottom. And the bottom of that league isn't great, right? Everyone's pushing to get better, but this season it's been a little bit down. So I think it places even more emphasis when you're looking at it from a conference race standpoint on those head-to-head games against each other amongst those top three you talked about with Scranton, E-Town, and Catholic. Because yeah, they're playing each other twice, and the importance and the value on each game is that much more because you can't really bet on the fact that one of those top three is going to lose. It's also just not only a testament to just kind of the way that the league is set up, but also just to those three teams and how good they are. I have all of them in my top 25. I got two of them in my top 10. I think there's a lot of strength there and three teams that could go deep in the tournament depending on what draws they get. So yeah, I think that's been a really interesting storyline to follow. Scranton has looked really impressive so far, kind of in the class of the field, but Catholic and E-Town certainly not far behind. And to your point, that conference tournament is going to be a lot of fun to watch because you go in with three teams who all have a legitimate shot of winning that conference tournament and again making some noise in the national tournament.
Are there bubble teams that need to have a strong conference tournament just to be able to play their way in?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a handful of bubble teams that are kind of sitting in that position actually, and one that kind of stands out if you're thinking about it right now is the SCAC actually here in kind of the southern part of the state in Texas, because you have a chance of getting three teams in and a fairly favorable chance. But Texas Lutheran is going to have to make a run, at least to the conference final. If they were to get three in, that would be fairly unprecedented for the league. But again, Texas Lutheran sitting firmly on the bubble. McMurray is not far ahead of them. And then Colorado College is fairly secure. So you've got two teams there that both probably need a pretty decent run through the conference tournament. And with it being a 6-team tournament, both Texas Lutheran and McMurray are kind of going to be in that position where they're going to have to reach the conference final. And if seeding works out the way that I think we all think it will, they'll probably have to play each other in a semifinal to get to that final. So there's definitely a good chance of getting three in there, but it'll be interesting with them seeing the bubble. The one I think everyone should be watching is the NESCAC, though. They have a chance of getting 5 teams in right now. So it's really a matter of if, the way that the Bates-Amherst matchup plays out, Amherst probably needs a win there to feel secure. They're sitting on the bubble. They're still going to have a chance with a quarterfinal loss to Bates on Saturday, but their chances get a lot better if they win. And Bates, even with a quarterfinal loss and the 0-4 start to NESCAC play with what they've done as of late, would still be in a position to get in. So really, Amherst is that kind of that bubble team in that scenario that probably needs to win that quarterfinal to feel secure. And the NESCAC could get 5 in, which would be pretty surprising, I think. I don't know if everyone was expecting that going into the year with MPI. But those are two that I would just be keeping an eye on. And a third I would throw out there, not conference tournament wise, but WashU, because WashU is in a spot where, they have a few conference games left with the UAA not playing a league tournament, but they're going to be very much in the bubble. Probably last 3 in or first 3 out, if you're looking at it from that standpoint of things. So they're going to be right there. It's going to come down to the wire. They probably need to win out at this point after losing to Carnegie Mellon yesterday. And so that's where they're at right now. But WashU, another one to keep an eye on as far as a very big bubble team.
When you send in your top 25 list, now how do you balance the and weigh competition level versus the result? Like who plays like strength of schedule basically against wins and losses.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. It's something that as a voter is different for everyone. For me, I place a lot of emphasis on strength of schedule. I think there's a lot of value in that. I watch a lot of games as well, though. I try to watch as many teams as I can play as possible, right? Because the eye test is important as well, and I found that even more so over the years. But there's teams in certain leagues where they may not be tested super well night in, night out, like you would in a WIAC or a NESCAC. And yet they're top 25 worthy, and they deserve some attention. They deserve a look at the very least. And so I try to actually balance out that eye test with the strength of schedule. The records themselves, if you look through my ballot, the records vary because I think that points back to the strength of schedule piece of it. Some of it's also just performance based, and there's teams who have played and picked up some really quality wins, but they've been very narrow, or there's been certain things with their efficiency. I look at efficiency a lot as well in putting together that top 25 because I think it's a good baseline to compare everybody against each other. Because I think it is hard. How much weight do you put on particular teams' strength of schedule and the schedule that they played, and especially as of late, right? When you get into conference, you don't get to choose how your conference plays out or how good your conference is. And so some teams who played a strong non-conference in November and December, they may not get the same amount of benefit in the eyes of a voter if they play a relatively weak schedule in January, February. And that's not always a great indication of how good they actually are. But yeah, I think strength of schedule is extremely important to include because these teams like in the WAC, right? Wisconsin lacrosse is a great example. They beat UW Oshkosh. They're in my ballot this week now. Play a really tough non-conference schedule, picked up wins over UW Stout and UW Oshkosh in conference. I mean, that's the kind of resume that you look for, a team that's been tested night in, night out, and picked up some really, really impressive wins along the way.
Now, last question for you. When you finish the book, let's just say the book becomes a movie. Who plays you in the movie?
Man, I have no idea. I have no idea. Uh, it's a good question that I hadn't really thought about, to be honest with you. But I tell you what, I don't know. I mean, we'd have to even think about what the movie would be on, right? That yes, a rider going across the country watching small college Division III basketball. Be an interesting movie for sure. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that one.
How can people interact with you on social media and what you got coming up?
For sure, man. My X/Twitter at Zayas Riley, just my name, just like that. I'm also run the Scoop on D3 Hoops newsletter. You can find that on d3hoops.com as well as on Substack if you search the Scoop on D3 Women's Hoops. And those are probably the two best places to find me. Always interacting on Twitter. Love interacting with the D3 Hoops community there. And yeah, the book hopefully going to be out by the time next season tips off. That's the goal right now. So we're working on finalizing kind of that lead time, but really, really excited to continue putting this book together. I think there's a lot of great stories and a lot of things I'm excited to include.
As always, my man Riley Zayas covering everything D3 women's hoop. Riley, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Ad Drop Podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.